It's the Fair Fight Initiative. We're talking about our broken system, all of the components that contribute to the system of criminal injustice in our country. And we've worked our way from arrest to prison. But there's one sort of wild card here that we're going to talk about with our executive director, David Utter, and that is this concept of qualified immunity. It's not a step in the process. It's more of an umbrella or a shield that protects so much of the behavior that happens along these different stages from ever being punished at all. And so, David, why don't you start by explaining what qualified immunity is? It may have different names in different areas of the country, but the general concept around how this umbrella protects all of this bad behavior, no matter when it's confronted.
I think that qualified immunity needs to be understood within the context of the protections the federal courts have built up over the decades to fight civil rights litigation, right? So I guess it was in the 70s, the Supreme Court said, you cannot sue a prosecutor for anything they do when they're in the courtroom. You can't sue a prosecutor for anything they did as a prosecutor. So what that means is you can have a prosecutor lie, cheat, and steal, put an innocent man on death row, and not be able to be sued. You can also have a judge issue ruling after ruling that is illegal. You can have a judge engage in all sorts of horrible behavior on the bench in order to get you convicted, and you can't sue that judge. That's called absolute immunity. And prosecutors and judges have fought for years to get those immunities built, and now it protects them from really, really bad behavior. Qualified immunity is different in that it is yet another judicial protection afforded law enforcement that has really no basis in the Constitution. What it essentially says is that if you're a police officer and you violate somebody's civil rights, you can walk away from that lawsuit. You can be found not liable if that's what the judge says, what the court say would be a new constitutional right. You can only violate somebody's civil rights if a court somewhere has said that that particular behavior is a violation. It's, there's many cases that have 1,000 sort of silly and absurd outcomes based on it, but the fundamental reason for qualified immunity is it's federal courts over the decades building up law to protect law enforcement, whether they behave badly and violate the Constitution or not.
And important to note, like you have, that this is a series of judicial precedents. This is nowhere in the United States Constitution. This is actually nowhere written into law by the United States Congress. This is just simply judges looking out for their own and looking out for them who help feed into this system. I always like to use the term around qualified immunity that if something bad happens in our system of criminal injustice, it's not good enough that someone did wrong. In order to be held liable for it, they also had to be evil.
That's right. And that's why, and I think this is a double-edged sword because you see what happened to George Floyd. And I think that the majority of people that see that say that officer, those officers were evil. Those officers crossed the line times 100, and therefore they're going to be held accountable. I can't tell you how many clients I have that have called my office to say, this officer treated me incredibly disrespectfully. This officer threw me to the ground and rubbed my face in dirt and locked me up for no reason. Over and over and over again, you get those calls. And the reason police officers can do that is because the federal courts have, over the decades, built up the protections, built up immunities, and in this case, it's qualified immunity that it's, I know there's been a lot of discussion about it in Congress, but they haven't acted. You're exactly right. We could stop it tomorrow if Congress were to pass a law to say that, if a cop violates the Constitution, then you can sue them in court, period, dot. That there's no immunities that apply. But that's not going to happen unless we activate, understand what's going on, and start fighting for the Constitution and for our communities.
We hope that navigating through this broken system with us, component by component, has helped you understand how onerous it can be to seek redress at any step of this broken system, whether it was a wrongful arrest or a harmful sentence or a predatory probation system or deplorable conditions in our jails and prisons. But when you layer qualified immunity over that, consider how few plaintiffs' attorneys, civil rights attorneys, criminal defense attorneys have the resources, have the time, and have the wherewithal to help people seek redress, especially when they are then going to go into court and face precedents like qualified immunity. This is why Fair Fight is here. We hope that you've enjoyed this tour through the broken system of criminal injustice, how unenjoyable that it may be. We hope that it compels you to give in small or large dollar amounts to help feed that next case that we hope can bring systemic change.